instead of having a bland and boring prayer life, what we're doing is taking these prayers from the Bible that seem dangerous, and we're just praying them each for a whole week. And today's prayers, it can be found in 1 Samuel chapter 3. And in 1 Samuel chapter 3, we've got two main characters in the story that we're going to think about today. One is Eli, who's an old priest. He's nearly blind. He's coming to the end of his life. And a young boy, Samuel, who is a helper of Eli the priest. And the story starts and with a really sad verse. It's in verse 1, in 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 1. It starts with a really sad verse. And this is what it says. It says, in those days, messages from God were very rare. In those days, messages from God were very rare. It was a season where people had turned their hearts from God. They were behaving in all sorts of ways that displeased God. And that created kind of a fogginess, a lack of spiritual clarity. It almost a bit of a filter that stopped people seeing and hearing God. And so they'd learned not to do that. In those days, messages from God were very rare. I wonder if that is your experience, that you're somebody who says, you know what, in these days, in my life, messages from God are very rare. Maybe you're someone who's never heard God speak to you. You know, the idea that God could speak to you is quite foreign. If that's the case, then this is going to be a really exciting story for you. We're going to look at some encouragements from this story, and we're going to draw out a couple of practical things towards the end, two practical things that you can use in order to hear from God, if that's what you want to do. It says in verse 7 here that Samuel had never heard from God before. God had never spoken to him. He's about 11 or 12 probably in this story, so maybe the first year of high school, you know, who's at the kind of bottom rung of the maturity ladder. Yet actually God spoke to him. God worked in his life. And we love to have kids involved in our worship here at Hope Church. It was fantastic having Harry praying towards the start of our service. It was brilliant having our kids leading us in some worship last week with their singing and their dancing.
Thank you, oh thank you, for all history you were faithful. Thank you, oh thank you, you are just the same when it comes to me.
But the reason that we got kids involved in our videos is not just because they're cuter than me, although they truly are. Not because they're going to get more likes than me, because they're not. That's a cue for you to like this video. That would be really brilliant. But the reason that we have kids involved is because they can hear God, because they're equally placed as any adult to connect with God and hear from God. And this story almost illustrates that it's Samuel, a young boy who'd never heard from God, who was hearing from him in this story. And the reason that's an encouragement for you and me is that he's a child in the story who's never heard from God before, yet they hear from God. And if a child can come, if someone who has no experience and hear from God can hear from God, then that means the door's open to any of us. That actually any sort of background, whether you're thinking, you know, there's things that I've done that exclude me, or whether you're thinking, well, I'm not really a church person, I'm kind of new to this. You know, those things don't exclude you. God opens his arms and he welcomes and he says, listen, I love you. I created you. I sent Jesus for you. You're included in this. I'd love to bless you and speak to you. And we so often categorize people, and there's people who are advanced and people who aren't, the people who are further ahead than others, the people who are more likely to receive the good stuff than others. But, you know, just God doesn't work like that. And the story encourages us. Samuel is me and Samuel is you. And so not only can we be encouraged because God initiates, and any desire you're feeling now to speak and hear God speak is God working, but actually look at Samuel. He's not excluded. He's welcome even though he's got no idea what he's doing, even though he's a child. And that means you're welcome, even if you feel, I've got no idea what I'm doing. And God wants to speak to you. And so the invitation's open to you to take this prayer, this dangerous prayer this week. Speak to me, Lord. And to pray it regularly.